Alright. Next is, my status as an assassin obviously exceeds the hero's. This sounds obnoxious, but let's try it out anyway.
A, I can't believe Sunrise would waste their time making this. And B, I can't believe Sunrise made something this mediocre looking. Well, that one I can believe because they've made some real stinkers in the past, but this is so mediocre. Like, this is one of those shows where it tries to have like a really saturated color palette to make it like really pop, but if you actually look like just the tiniest bit closer, you'll see that like the line work is really sloppy and it doesn't move all that well. There's a lot of stagnancy to the shots, and even the opening action scene felt weird. It felt weirdly framed, like just the way, like for as fluid as it was, it didn't hit quite as well because it just didn't have impact, I guess. Also, this is another one of the whole class gets isekai'd kind of stories, which is another subgenre of isekai that I hate because they never do anything interesting with it. Like, what's the point of isekai'ing the whole class if you're going to like split them up immediately and have the main character just go solo or have like one or two hangers on? What's the point if they're not going to be interacting constantly? Like, if you're not going to do battle royale, why isekai the whole class? It seems pointless. I'm sure a lot of them were about to get murdered horribly, but I didn't get that far because it's so lame and boring. It sucks. I don't really have anything else to say. I wish I did because I kind of like talking about bad shows I've not realized recently, but I just like talking. I don't know why I'm extending this longer than I have to. Sometimes I get it in my head that I have to talk a little bit more about a show than I am, but that's stupid. This is stupid.
Yeah, that was bad. That did not like that. Status as a hero or an assassin, whatever the fuck, off the list. Okay, Gintama, Mr. Ginpachi's Zany class. This is a full TV series of a spin-off of like a post-credits sequence from like old Gintama, like season 1 Gintama. It's a classroom AU. I have not seen anybody talk about it this season, which is a little worrying, but man, I'm a Gintama stan, so let's dive in.
Well, damn, that is a rare Gintama L. Damn. I got through about an episode and a half of Mr. Ginpachi's Zany class. If you're not familiar with Gintama, familiarize yourself with Gintama because it's one of the best anime ever made. But if you are unfamiliar, there used to be some like side gags at the end of each episode of the first season of Gintama, where they would have like a high school AU where Gintoki would be the teacher and all of the other characters would be students. And apparently at some point that got turned into a light novel, and that's what this anime is based on. It's just the high school AU stuff, which in theory should work. However, in my experience with Gintama, in its nearly 400 episodes, or 300 whatever, however many there are, Gintama is at its worst when it is just being a gag comedy. If there's no big character thing or big emotional moment, if there aren't any big action set pieces, if there's not a bunch of plot happening, and it's just the comedy, it has a much higher chance of being bad. Not always. Like, I think of the first one that comes to mind of being really good in that regard is when, which one? I forgot his name. Fuck. The one member of the Shinsengumi who smokes. The smoking episode, the no smoking episode is a really good gag episode. But also there are some really not good gag episodes. Like, I think the Dragon Quest parody was pretty not good, if I recall correctly. And initially, I thought we were going to get some good gags with this one because it starts off, as Gintama usually does, being extremely fucking meta. They make a fucking Dragon Ball GT reference and about how GT is bad. And I'm like, alright, fucking right on, man. Go do it. And like they talk about how Gintama was already over, and it's like, but we needed to bring it back because a Bandai Namco exec said we're bringing it back. And that's a fucking great bit. But once the actual, like, regular classroom stuff started, it was pretty clear that the gags were not all that good. So, it's... How do I explain bad comedy? I guess I really can't, other than they are very long and elaborate jokes that typically in a manzai comedy format, as anime usually does, but they're just not funny at the end of it. The gags are very often too complex for their own good, and it devolves into me following the train of thought. Not necessarily to a punchline, or I should say not necessarily to a good punchline. There usually is a punchline, it's not a good one. Which is kind of a shame because this actually isn't a bad looking show. It's pretty polished in terms of a gag comedy series. Character designs are pretty solid. There's some decent cuts here and there. Rarely any jank. I like the color design for it. But it's just so either not funny or so boring. And it's just very, very tedious to watch. Also, there's one character in this who I just do not remember. The character with the recorder. Is that supposed to be a gag where it's just a character that never existed in the show and they're just there? Or is it a character that I just completely forgot existed? I don't know. I'm not really going to stick around to find out because it's... sorry. It's very late. Because it's just not funny. That's the long and short of it. It's just not funny.
Alright. Rare Gintama L, but an L's an L. Mr. Ginpachi's Zany class coming off the list. Next, plus size Misadventures in Love. I've been seeing promotion for this, like, not necessarily promotion, but I've seen posts about this for, like, across multiple seasons. Like, I think this was supposed to come out earlier, but it kept getting pushed back and back, which is not the best sign, but who knows? Let's try it out.
This one was definitely much more average than I was expecting, which in this case would be a compliment because I was expecting it to be really bad, but it turned out to be just kind of average. And I don't hate it in any way, really. I don't love it. I don't particularly like it. I can see the positive aspects of it. Like, is this the third show now this season where I talked about the romantic lead in a show being of a non-conventional attractiveness? So, and on this end of it now, we've got a fat lady who is... I'm a little confused by the visual presentation of the opening, because it's a plus-size lady who has amnesia, and it's possible that someone, it's presented initially as she tried to kill herself, but then it was someone pushed her over a railing or something. But in the initial shots of her dying initially, it's like she has brown hair, and then in the rest of the show she has blonde hair, or less in the rest of the episode she has blonde hair. And it was really confusing at first, because I was like, wait, are we about to do an isekai for a plus size lady? But no. And then I was like, wait, did she just transfer bodies into someone else? And I think eventually I landed on the brown hair was just an insert, a visual self-insert, I guess, which, I don't know, sure. Very visually confusing. But, like, I don't dislike the show. I think that the main character is a little too boisterous for my taste, but, like, her personality fits well. The fat lady who is very proud of who she is, I'm familiar with that archetype. I follow a few podcasters with that archetype. She strikes me as very Paige Wesley-esque, from Cult Podcast and Romancing the Pod and Horror Virgin and all of that stuff. She reminds me a lot of her in certain regards, but like less self-aware, I guess. So what am I trying to say? At least from the first episode, I think it's a good representation of a fat character, and the show not shitting on the character for being fat. Other characters in the show shit on her for being fat, but I don't think the show itself is doing that, which I think is a good message. I've seen some things about how it might not be good with that later on, or maybe just other stuff in the show just being a little, the messaging might be a little off, but from what I saw, it's fine. I just didn't particularly vibe with it. The comedy wasn't hitting super well. It's foreshadowing a lot of office drama, which I am not a fan of in any way. Not my cup of tea at all. I do think it's got some potential in it, but also it's very average looking. It's not bad looking. Occasionally it has a couple cuts that look pretty nice, and the editing's solid. It's got some pretty interesting visual... Well, not pretty interesting. It's got some slightly interesting visuals in it. Apparently this director has done a lot of stuff. Like, this is the Rent-A-Girlfriend director. But he's done, like, a lot of stuff. Not necessarily a lot of good stuff, but a lot of stuff. So the experience shows in how, at least in how the show is put together. It still doesn't have a lot of resources behind it, it looks like, but it is competent. I'm not looking for competent, I'm looking for good, and like really good. But if anything sounds like something that you would like, I guess I will put a tentative, maybe try it out for you. Yeah, I don't hate this show, which doesn't mean I want to watch more, but I don't hate it.
Yeah, not as into it as I would have liked, but I didn't dislike it as much as I thought I would. So, plus size Misadventures is off the list. Next, The Dark History of the Reincarnated Villainess. Okay, we got Isekai and we got Villainous, so trope on top of trope. And that's usually how the Villainous stories go, though. So, anyway, haven't seen anybody talk about this one. Fuck it, we ball.
Man, Studio Dean be working overtime the past couple seasons. They did this and Ninja vs. Gokudo this season. And this is just as bad. At least in terms of how it looks. What is this? The Dark History of the Reincarnated Villainous? Something like that. So it's a villainous isekai, and it looks like shit. It's so incredibly mediocre looking. Just not pleasant to look at in any way. I guess if you really pressed me, the villainous design is kinda okay, but still nothing special. And boy, do they front load this with exposition and just because this is a villainous isekai where she gets isekai'd into her own OC fanfiction because she spent her teenage years dreaming of being isekai'd into a world where she's a heroine. But the twist is that she becomes a villainess, which is a cool idea. I appreciate the thought. It's original, at least in terms of this subgenre. Being isekai'd into your own cringy fanfiction is kind of cool. It's kind of a cool idea, but boy, they front load this with exposition. It's really, really boring. And it does not inspire confidence about how the rest of the show is written. And on top of it being kind of ugly, no thanks. I will say this is one of the least offensive isekai of the season. Offensive's not the right word. This is one of the least bad isekai of the season. Not a high bar, but I do at least. I'm currently working. It might be out by this point, but I'm working on a Substack post about as an update to my Knights and Magic video from way back about how isekai is ruining original ideas. That's a very loaded statement that requires a lot more explaining, and so you can just read that post whenever that comes out. But I don't think this is that. I think the isekaiing is appropriate here, and it's an interesting kind of isekai in terms of like, hey, this is a world you made. You did this to yourself. Now live in it. That's interesting. It's a shame that the execution's kind of extremely mid. It's just not that good.
No, we are not balling, actually. This is bad. Dark History, off the list. Next. This Monster Wants to Eat Me. This is some kind of Yuri drama, I believe, about a mermaid. I saw some people complaining about the production in the first episode, and then I have not heard a peep about it since then, which is either really bad or people just got those kind of people just got bored with it. I like Yuri. Let's see if this is good Yuri.
All right. I surprisingly liked that one quite a bit. That was good. Just finished up This Monster Wants to Eat Me, which is billed as a supernatural Yuri drama. I'm gonna be up front. The Yuri really does not come into play until like the end of episode 12 out of 13. It does. If you're looking for Yuri from Jump, you're not gonna get it. I'm just gonna say it, you're not. It's a lot of drama and a lot of like interpersonal relationship drama, but I would not say there is anything quote unquote romantic about it until episode 12. Unless you count some of the backstory stuff. Maybe I'm just not seeing it, but I guess that's just the note up front is do not go into this expecting Yuri drama as like a core tenet of it. There is drama, definitely, but it's not Yuri drama. This is not that. What this is a very, I'm not going to say subtle, but very well thought out story about a person who is deeply depressed and suicidal. That is what this show is about. This is about a girl who lost her family when she was very young and has not gotten over it at all. And there seem to be very few people around her who are able to comfort her in a way that truly matters, thus leading her to just wanting to die. Like, truly being suicidal and wanting to die. And I think that element is conveyed very well in this show through the visual means of it. This isn't a massively strong production. It is very pulled back. It is very tempered in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, it feels like something that would have come out a decade ago. But in a good way, sort of. It's not incredibly flashy. It's not very standout in production-wise, but what it does have is a very refined, and very intent control over its framing, its pacing, the pacing of shots, like how long shots last, in order to draw out the tension of any given scene, how shots flow together, the overall tone of each scene, which is usually but usually just has this sense of heaviness to it, in the sense of like lethargy, which I think is a pretty accurate depiction of depression. This just heaviness, this lack of movement, this stagnancy, which they use the undersea overlay to add to the stuffiness, the claustrophobia, the just stagnancy of our Hinako's situation, our main character. It's just, there aren't any suicide attempts per se, other than her walking into yokai that are trying to kill her, or just sort of letting them try to kill her. There's no like suicidal imagery. That's the word I'm going for. But that's what this show is about, and I think it does a very good job at capturing that feeling, that sense of just nothing moving, not being able to push forward, this just being constantly held back, held down, and this suffocation. I think that does a very good job of that. As do the way that the characters interact with each other. Hinako is just she's just this very, very reserved is the wrong word, because reserved implies that she's like purposefully being reserved. She is aloof in the sense of just not really feeling very strongly about things, which is a thing that depression does. It doesn't just make you sad, it makes you drained. It makes you just not want, it just makes you not feel things at times, other than just the dull sadness. And I think the way Hinako acts throughout this is very good. It portrays that very well. So I've watched this over the course of several days while also cramming so much studying into my head, so my thoughts are a little jumbled. I've already forgotten the best friend character's name, but she is very bubbly and fun, but also not exact in this sense of she is both the kind of person that Hinako needs and also the kind of person that really can't help her. Like, yes, she is this guiding, this single light in Hinako's life, that where she did not try to walk on eggshells around her after the accident, and so she became this sort of singular light in Hinako's life. Although that turned out to be somewhat of a lie, because she's actually a yokai guardian deity of sorts, who just wants to help Hinako recover and do better and like be able to live happily, but she is simply not able to do that because before the yokai reveal, I thought it was going to do something else with the with this idea of her constantly trying to help Hinako but not giving Hinako what she wants, and therefore it's not helping in any way. And then Shiori swoops in and actually gives Hinako hope for what she wants. And then I thought there was going to be some Yuri drama from there. Not what happens, because it turns out the best friend, that's really annoying me that I don't remember what her goddamn name is. Miko. Should have remembered that. Miko. Shrine. I'm not sure if that's exactly what the name usually translates to, but I'm thinking of like shrine maidens and stuff. Anyway, yeah, Miko, I thought that was where the drama was going to come from, but instead the drama comes from the fact that Shiori, the actual who becomes the romantic lead in this eventually, promises that she will eventually eat Hinako because Shiori is a mermaid, and she has basically marked Hinako as her prey and wants her to grow up nice and healthy and strong so that when she's at the peak of her deliciousness, she can eat her. Which to Hinako responds as like, "Oh wow, really? That sounds cool. Let's do that." Not in those words, but it's very odd in the sense of Shiori gives Hinako what she wants, which is the opportunity to die, or at least the appearance of the opportunity to die. And that's what eventually starts Hinako down this path, this very, very long path towards getting to a better place in her life. And it's this very complicated, borderline problematic relationship. And I'm not going to even attempt to delve any more into that, because I don't think that's trying to go down that path defeats the point of the fact that, yeah, this is a very messy and kind of fucked up situation that these characters are putting themselves in. Acquiescing, or at least putting on the appearance of acquiescing to an acceptance of suicide is not good. But putting on the act is what eventually gets Hinako to a better place. It's very complicated and very messy. And that's one of the things that's very compelling about this show. I don't think it's trying to say, yes, this is a morally correct thing to do. I think it's self-aware enough to know that it's not, but it chooses to do that anyway because A, it's interesting, and B, people with that state of mind don't always think the most of yes, this is the most moral thing to do, or this is the most logical thing to do, or anything like that. It's much more based on irrational emotions. Depression is an irrational thing. I'm not minimizing it by saying that, but it is an irrational thing from a logical perspective. But that doesn't matter because it is a purely emotional thing, and so you can kind of only fight depression with something else that is purely emotional, even if that emotion is misguided or sadistic in a way, or just flat out wrong. It's such a fascinating dynamic, and I think the show pulls that off really well. And also it pulls off why the eventual reveal of no, Shiori wasn't ever going to kill Hinako, because she gave her some of her blood when Hinako was very young, and so that basically makes her inedible to Shiori, or borderline inedible. And so there was never going to be an eating at all. Which leads to a sort of trust breakdown, which also leads to Shiori having to stop thinking like a yokai and actually think on human terms for once and actually talk things out, which is another very important thing, that they do actually just have a very full and complete conversation about everything and how they feel, and which still eventually leads to another promise of Shiori promising to eat Hinako, even though she finds her disgusting in terms of taste. Which, still bad, but it does stop Hinako from killing herself. So it's a wild ride. In terms of just the moral implications of everything, but also it's a very it's also a very, very subdued in terms of tone, and just the heaviness of it all works so well. I'm a little torn on the music, because on the one hand the music does such a good job of just making the tone of meshing with the tone of the scene and really bringing out the sadness of it. But on the other hand, I also think it's mixed a little too high, or it's mixed a little too loud, so it occasionally ends up overpowering parts of the scene. So, and also a lot of it is just sad piano music with some vocal work here and there. I guess that's a bit more of a nitpick, but I did want to say that. And also, I think they needed to rein in Ai Faru at a few times. She was the voice of Miko in this, the best friend character, and she is definitely the bubbly best friend character. Very similar to her role in what was her name? Hibiki in the Dumbbells anime, the main character in that. I guess that's the best comparison, but even more bubbly. Bordering on annoying. But yeah, I really enjoyed this show. Occasionally it got a bit slow, but I think that is also kind of the point in some ways, in terms of just dragging out the emotions that are at play. And yeah, just a very solid work that depicts depression very well. I don't think a sequel has been announced yet, or if there will be a sequel at all. I didn't see a lot of people talk about this show after the first episode, and it didn't dawn on me until Weirdy pointed it out to me on Twitter that it's very similar to The Summer Hikaru Died. We have a homosexual romance between a human and a supernatural being that wants to kill them, sort of, but also doesn't want to kill them. So yeah, but instead of Yaoi, it's Yuri. But also it's like barely Yuri. I imagine the manga content after this point delves into the Yuri a little more, because we actually do get much more somewhat more romantic stuff at the end of episode 12 and in some stuff in episode 13. So I would watch more of this. I don't know how much more it could add to the central themes of everything, but I would give it a shot, I guess. But I also wouldn't be upset if we didn't get more, because it ends on a pretty solid note. Yeah, I would recommend this. It's not the most impressive looking show, but I don't think it's a bad looking show either. It feels a little dated, but kind of in a good way, and it's a lot to watch at times in terms of just the emotions, especially if you're someone who has experienced depression. It's just this it's an intentional slog, and yeah, it's good.
All right, This Monster Wants to Eat Me is complete. And we're gonna go. Where do I want to put you? Yeah, we're gonna put you right under. There's no freaking way. In the number 41 slot with a light 7. It's not the most standout show, but I appreciate a lot of what it does, especially in terms of tone. I really enjoyed that. Okay, next up is Shabake. I have absolutely no clue what this one is about. I have not seen anybody talk about this at all, so we're going in blind. Let's see what it is.
I'm pretty sure I've mentioned this before, but I really don't like the phrase "nothing happens" when describing some kind of story, because there's always something happening. And I understand the intent behind the statement of like, oh, nothing cool happened, or nothing interesting happened, or nothing important happened. I think nothing important happened is what tends to be the meaning of that phrase. And even then, I don't like it because there's always something happening in a scene. Even if it's like the most minute bit of characterization. But goddamn, does it feel like nothing fucking happens in the first 10 minutes of this show. Shabake is so fucking boring. Nothing of major consequence really happens in the first half of this episode. And apparently it's a mystery series about a series of murders, I guess. But, boy, I don't care. I do not care about anything. There's nothing particularly wrong with anything. The characterization makes sense. There is characterization happening. It looks decent, not great, but it doesn't look bad. It's decently polished for a show that it had basically no marketing behind it. The character designs are solid. A little generic, but solid. Or at least a little generic in terms of historical fiction. There's nothing I can point to that's quote-unquote bad about this other than the fact that there's no hook. Like, I think the hook was supposed to be that this guy the young master of this house gets yokai as servants, but they don't do anything for the first half of this show, or for the first half of this episode. They're just humans. We're told that they're yokai, and I assume at some point they will be doing yokai things, but they don't do anything upon being introduced as yokai. What is your goal here? What are you trying to do? How are you trying to grab my attention? What is being done here to make me go, wow, this is a show that I gotta watch? You can't do, and I skimmed through the thumbnails on the timeline for the video. 16 minutes is how long it takes for something to happen. By which I mean the first murder in this show happens. 16 minutes with nothing happening before that. And again, I hate the phrase nothing happens, but fuck me, that's what this feels like. It is so nothing. And there's nothing wrong with the scenes. There's nothing about the scenes that makes me irritated or annoyed or make me go, that doesn't make any sense. It's all this is a great way to describe it. It's all logical and it makes sense, but it does nothing to make me care about it because it's just so bland and not interesting. It's been a while since I've seen a show with zero hook to it. Even in the really fucking terrible fantasy schlock, I can see where the hook is most of the time. I don't see the hook for this. Is it supposed to... We're done here. This is so fucking boring. We're done.
Okay, that one's a bit of a bust. Really boring. Shabake is off the list. And now it's time for an end cap. Gachiakuta. This is one of the big shonen anime of the year. I think it's shonen. It's at the very least, it's one of the big bones anime of the year. Double core. Mori Calliope does the second opening theme, so I'm hyped for that. I think this one's kind of edgy, but you know what? Let's see how good it can be.
Alright, that was really fun. really fun time had there. Just finished up all of Gachiakuta. Took me about a week to get through that with my schedule, and honestly I wanted to get through it quicker. Some days I had to limit myself to like 2 episodes a day for other stuff. But in any case, yeah, this is definitely very Soul Eater adjacent. I don't remember if I mentioned it in the intro, but Kei Urana, who is the author of the manga for Gachiakuta, worked as an assistant for Okubo, the Soul Eater author, when he was writing Fire Force, and apparently he literally called her his successor. And I can see that, because this has Soul Eater and Fire Force DNA all over it. In fact, it has a lot of shonen DNA all over it in some very fun ways, and some non-shonen stuff as well. Particularly the very punk aesthetic of it is very Soul Eater. The graffiti, the exaggerated character designs, the loudness of it all. It is so very Soul Eater, which is an aesthetic that I think anime could do with a little more of. In like some other ways, I guess. I don't know. Like, I love the roughness of it in a certain sense, both in terms of like the base character models and the sort of aesthetic that they use for the overall animation. This is not a very clean looking show, if that makes any sense. Like, the character models are not like very crisp and clean and typically and like of modern anime aesthetics. There's a crudeness to them, but not in like a not in a Yuasa kind of way, just in a sort of in a punkish anime kind of way. Like, it still looks like an anime aesthetic, but like a rough and tumble kind of version of it, in a sense. And I like that. I like the roughness of it, and the overall art direction is very good at emphasizing I guess roughness, like in terms of texture, is a great way to describe this show. There's not a lot. Actually, now that I think about it, a lot of that is due to the fact that the compositing is actually really good. Like, the character models work within the setting very well. And the setting is extremely well realized, with the detail of the garbage and the way cities are set up and just the way everything looks, the trash beasts. For as CG as they are, they still look very well realized within this world. Yeah, sorry, my thoughts are a little scattered because it's taken me so long to watch this. But yeah, I really like this show. It is very, not only in the aesthetic of Soul Eater, but also in sort of the narrative tendencies of Soul Eater, both for good and for bad. I guess in the bad sense, it has the classic shonen problem of immature humor, I guess is the best way to put it. Although I will say there are some very fun bits of immature humor. Like, there's a fight in like episode 4 or something, like episode 3 or 4, where Rudo, the main character, is fighting Zanka with a plunger, but he doesn't know what a plunger is, and he doesn't realize the plunger's covered in poop. And so he's just waving this plunger at this poop-covered plunger at Zanka, and it's actually very funny, very well-structured. It's a very well-structured poop joke. I have not seen a well-structured poop joke in a long time. So in that sense, it's very fun. It does get a little bit overly shouty a lot of times, I don't super mind that, except until in like, I think the last episode was probably the most obnoxious that it is with that, but that's because it's being purposefully comedic, I guess, which Soul Eater's comedy was always very hit and miss, and Gachiakuta's comedy is also very hit and miss. In mostly the same ways, in just terms of how extreme it is, like how in your face it is. And just sort of explaining the joke out loud, as is typical of anime. Another, I guess, narrative that I wasn't super huge on was the structure of the big fight in the Trash Storm arc of the second half of the season, where it's a lot of cutting back and forth between all the characters and flashbacks for those characters and so on and so forth. Necessary stuff, but I just don't think in this particular instance, I think it's not paced as well as it could have been. It's still very fun information to see, and it's very good stuff, but it's just I found myself thinking, come on, get back to the fight a little bit more than I was hoping for. So those are some of the. I should get off the it's like Soul Eater but train of logic, because this is definitely its own show, but again, the similarities are so very apparent in this one. And another one is like how it views humans, I guess, in terms of just the rawness of them. There is a very particular kind of darkness of humanity that both Urana and Okubo like to point to. I guess it's hard to describe it's just sort of like hey, there is some just real evil within everyone, basically. In Soul Eater, it's that madness idea. There's not like a concrete thing in Gachiakuta, but there is definitely a sense of like, yeah, there are a lot of people who have the capacity to do very evil things, including our main character, but it's up to their own conscience and their own willpower to not do that. Speaking of dark, the Penta Desert arc, or whatever, the Lady of the Penta Desert. Hey, content warning for sexual assault, because that's in here. Hoo boy. Yeah, I don't know what to say about episode 13 other than Jesus fucking Christ. It's a very well portrayed version of sexual assault, if that makes any sense. It's, how do I describe it? It is surprisingly realistic, both in terms of how it happens, are the character Amo being essentially sold into sexual slavery by her mother for change, essentially, and Amo just growing up trying to rationalize that choice to herself, like this feeling of like, oh, mom loves me, so she must have sent me to this guy so that I would be happy forever. And then her assaulter just gaslighting her into thinking that she's in love with him, and the crude cartoon drawings of the assault is unsettling, paired with the music. By the way, quick tangent on that. Quick tangent on two things. Firstly, it's been a long time since we've had a really good Taku Iwasaki soundtrack. If you're not familiar with Taku Iwasaki, you should be. But if you're not, I'd say his most famous soundtracks are probably Gurren Lagann and Soul Eater Gotchaman Crowds is up there. Part 2 of JoJo, not like season 2. I mean like part 2 of season 1. So all the stuff with Joseph, Joestar, all that's the dubstep in that's all Iwasaki, and all the over the top classical tracks. Taku Iwasaki has been my favorite soundtrack composer pretty much since I started doing a deep dive into anime. Like, as soon as I got to Soul Eater, I was like, oh, this guy fucking rules. But he's been in a bit of a... I'm not going to say he's been in a bit of a slump. It's just that he hasn't been doing a lot of shows that require really interesting soundtracks, I guess, or have the room for really interesting soundtracks. The only thing that really comes close, I guess, is Bungo Stray Dogs, which he's been working on for like... When did the first season of Bungo Stray Dogs come out? Was that like 2015 or 2016? And then season 5 was like 2023. So that's kind of what he was nailed down to for a while. And also Irregular at Magic High School, which I have not kept up with for obvious reasons. He made at least for me, he made a bit of a resurgence with the new Mononoke movie. What was that, last year? Yeah, last year. But even that one was a little just not quite up to snuff in terms of what the things that I like from Iwasaki, which is the sheer variety of stuff that he can do. The rock, the hip-hop, the classical, the insane shit, the insane hot pot blending of multiple genres of music, and that is definitely here in this one. I forget which episode it is, but I'm pretty sure, and don't quote me on this because he might not have done this one, but there's like an insert song in one of the fights in the episodes. The fight between Rio and Norde? I forget what her name is. The insert song in that is so goddamn fucking good. But even then, like, just the vocal tracks in this are so fun and hype and intense, and just everything about the soundtrack, the sound of this show is so cool. I do have some complaints, not with Iwasaki, but with some of the sound effect choices. They're a little bit too goofy at times, or not necessarily goofy, they're a little bit too squishy at times, I guess. Oh, my light went off. Dang it. Gotta charge that. Oh well. Anyway, minor quibble about the sound effects, but man, Taku Iwasaki is definitely back. This show fits his aesthetic perfectly. Speaking of aesthetic, the visual aesthetic for this show, aside from just the roughness of it, I love the visual ideas that it comes up with, because there's a lot of stuff in it that is just like a lot of the visual effects that it does are very cool. Just the layering of different textures and stuff, the abstract imagery that it uses for a lot of the more to convey sort of emotional like shifts and stuff. Like the black and white abstractness, the red and black abstractness is just very emotionally potent in ways that are just visually exciting to see. The color work in this is phenomenal. Normally, I'm not a fan of shows that are just kind of brown, but boy, they really know how to work with this brown in terms of not making it look gross. Like, there's a lot of... You've heard me talk about brown shows a lot in the past, I think, but this show is like purposefully brown. Well, that's not the right word. The other shows are probably purposefully brown as well, but this one is like, it's got a real nice deserty feel to it, like a wasteland kind of feel to it, but also there is a lot of color in it as well, with not just with the character designs, but with the graffiti and all the artwork and stuff. I love that there is a sense of artwork within this wasteland world, because humans kind of need color to liven up their lives. Apparently the show has its own graffiti like art consultant or something. I didn't see who it was, but I always saw it like right at the beginning of the credits. And it's damn good looking stuff. It's very cool. Everything, this show just looks very cool overall. Anyways, that was a very long double tangent away from Amo, who is... Oh, speaking of sound, it's been a while since we've had a really solid Kana Hanazawa. I always mix up the Hanakana. I'm just going to call her Hanakana. Kana Hanazawa. There we go. That's what it was. I don't know why I always mix up the syllables in her name. Hanakana as Amo. God damn. You forget when she's not in like major roles for a while. It's like, oh wow, she was everywhere for a while, and then this character happened, and I'm like, oh right, this is why she was everywhere for a while, because she's the fucking GOAT. She is so fucking good. This is one of the best vocal performances I've seen from 2025 in anime. It's just phenomenal work, both in terms of the character's insanity and her vulnerability and the deep, deep sadness in her. The whimsy. It's perfect. Hanakana is one of the best voice actresses of all time. Yeah. I was surprised I didn't recognize a lot of the other characters on in the cast for this, or I didn't recognize a lot of the other voice talent in the cast for this. I'm not saying they're nobodies, it's just they're not people that I'm used to seeing, or not people I'm used to checking, hey, who's this voice actor? But really solid all around. I am getting so distracted because there is so much fun stuff on the technical end of this show to talk about. I didn't even talk about the fact that the fight scenes are like not, with the exception of I think episode 21, the fight scenes are not big ol' Sakuga fests. They're not like explosive, hyper color, laser beam Sakuga mads. They're not bad either. They are very interesting on a technical level because of how they move. There is a lot of like camera movement in the fight scenes. A lot of stuff moving around the frame in very interesting ways. A lot of very good choreography. It's just very cool to look at. This is a very cool show to look at overall. It does have some stagnancy to it now and then, and definitely there's a lot of CG assets in it, but I think what can you say? It's CG assets. They're not going anywhere. I'm still going to complain about them, but they're not going to go anywhere. Yeah. So I've talked so much about this show visually and barely anything about its narrative, aside from the really dark stuff. But I mean, there is a lot of kind of dark stuff to the show, which is another... I noticed... I can't be the only one who noticed that there is something very Made in Abyss about this. Maybe it's just the... I don't know. Something about this feels like there's just a tinge of Made in Abyss influence in it. It first came to my mind when the big group of raiders showed up, and we had the beginning of the showdown between the raiders and the cleaners because of their their purple purple lantern lights, and it felt very Bound Rude to me. And a lot of the, I don't know, a lot of the clothing choices also felt very Made in Abyss to me in a certain way, I guess. The bagginess of the clothes and stuff like that. I don't know. And then the main villain, Zodal, he's sort of like if Boundrude didn't have any charisma, I guess. But even no, that's actually not what he's like at all. I don't know why I'm making the connection there, but something in my brain made that connection. But anyway, narrative. Let's talk about what the show is about. And what the show is about is a lot of things, but mainly, let's tackle the thematic stuff about this first. Boy, I'm talking a while about this show. There's a lot of motifs surrounding waste and the worth of objects and the value that we place on different things and different people. There's a lot of what am I trying to get at? It's a very easy line to draw between how we treat objects versus how we treat people and stuff like that, and how that's the end of the thought, I guess. And this show explores that in some very interesting ways. I like the idea of how it approaches waste and how specifically how better off societies get rid of their waste, and where that waste eventually ends up in someone's backyard, and someone has to deal with that waste. But the better off societies just don't have to think about that. So, very interesting thought there. Totally not something that's relevant to the real world in any way, and how we treat nations that the higher per capita nations treat. How the higher per capita nations treat the lower per capita nations, I guess, is a good way to describe it. Very fun thought there, and by fun I mean, sorry, my brain is sharding. That's a good way to. My brain is starting to short circuit, and it is sharding. Yeah. God, my thoughts are scattered on this. Rudo is a very, very solid protagonist and a great example of, like, very slow, not all at once character growth. Like, it takes him a very long time to learn lessons. Because, specifically, it takes him a very long time to learn lessons about how to change certain aspects of his personality, either to better get along with people or to be less hot-headed and to think more rationally in certain situations. Like, I really like the talk that Enjin has with him after he just beats the ever-living shit out of Amo. And just this and how it's just sort of like, hey, you gotta just think a little more before you do things, and just not let your emotions control you. And I think Rudo is a very strong realization of that idea of someone who has very strong temper issues and often lets that get the better of him. And how repressing that and then not redirecting it still ends up with him ending up in outbursts eventually. Yeah, great character. Really love the rest of the cast as well. They're very solid in a very wacky shonen kind of way. Gita is the best character. I'm just gonna say that. The cute girl in the kaiju onesie, love that. Also, I love that Rio is as the ex-assassin character who chips her down. Well, I'll just pull out a gun and shoot you. How about that? That was such a fucking phenomenal shock in her fight scene. Definitely interested in learning more about her as a character and where she comes from, because there is definitely something a little off about her. Yeah, I will say the villains are not particularly strong for the most part. Jabber is fun because he's insane. Who's the Zenitsu ass dude, Nue or something like that? The guy with the red hair and the mask. I'm sure there's something cool going on with him, but man, he is rough to deal with. I will say Zodal is a very interesting character in terms of how his dialogue works, because he is very he's definitely like a manipulator kind of villain in terms of like he's very well spoken in terms of like trying to convince people to do things, and like he's also sort of like a mastermindy kind of plant seeds to grow into fruits that I can use later kind of guy. But as a character, he's not super compelling. He's much better as a catalyst to see how Rudo reacts to him than he is as a villain in his own right. So, a little disappointing there. But I don't dislike him. And again, I think his dialogue with Rudo is very interesting from a debate. This isn't a great analogy for it, but it's a very debate me bro kind of manner. It's sort of like well, hey, what do you think about this though? Huh? Again, not quite super accurate, but it's a rough idea, I guess. Last thing I want to do before ending is episode 9 might be my favorite episode of this show. And it's probably the most inconsequential episode in the entire first season. So this episode is they go out to talk to their spellcaster guy, Gob, who's like this graffiti artist. And they find out near the beginning of this episode that Gob had passed away that morning. Now this is a character that showed up once in a previous episode as like a passing graffiti artist character. He did not, he had like maybe 2-3 lines of dialogue at most. But we get this episode about the characters just sort of reminiscing about him, and we see Remlin, his successor, and how they react to his passing in this manner of like just starts off with immense sadness, and then eventually they're just like, okay, I'm done being sad because Gob would hate that, and so now we're going to celebrate his life. And it just turns the finale of this episode just turns into like this big fireworks display, and that's just incredibly beautiful and moving. And that episode nearly brought a tear to my eye because it was just so out of nowhere almost. It reminds me a lot of... You remember the episode of Space Dandy where he's in the afterlife? Same kind of vibe as that, where it's just this very out of nowhere, very beautiful episode that doesn't have a whole lot to do with the main thrust of the show, but it's so incredibly important to, like, the nuances of characterization and the how these characters interact with these kinds of ideas and stuff like that. It's I kind of wish there was more episodes like that, and I hope that that's what the arc that this season left off in the middle of. I hope that that's what this arc is kind of like in a way, because the first season ends like halfway through an arc. But the small little defeats and celebrations along the way are what really stand out the most sometimes with stories. These very small moments where we see these glimpses of unique humanity. And I really, really appreciate that. Sadly, that's really the only episode in this season that's like that. I do wish it was I almost wish it was a little more episodic. I do and that we got more small stories before jumping into this big 10 episode arc in the second half of the series. Or in the second half of this first season. Which it's not bad, but it is a little clunky and a little dragged out at times. Not dragged out, but not properly paced at times. And those little small, I would have liked a few more episodes of those small moments before we jumped into plot. Does that make any sense? Yeah. But yeah, Gachiakuta, good. Definitely going to watch the second season because I want to see what happens with Amo after her kidnapping. And what the hell Tamsi has to do with that, apparently. One of the cleaners, I guess. He always did rub me the wrong way throughout this whole show, so it's going to be really interesting to see where that goes. I want to know more about all of these characters. I want to see them in weird situations that highlight their quirks and eccentricities and what makes them human. Probably not going to get a whole lot of that, but one can hope. And I am genuinely curious about the lore behind this show. It has a very unique setting that's with a lot of very unique lore, not very interesting lore behind it that I'm very interested in finding out about. Yeah. That was a damn good show.
Okay. Gachiakuta is complete. And let's see, what was I going to do with this one? Yeah, we're going to put you in... Come on. In the number 10 spot. Just at the edge of the top 10 with a decent 8. Yeah, it's good. I'm hoping the second season gets even better. A lot of... Whoever said that the fall season was kind of disappointing... liars. Liars, a lot of them. Half my top 10 is fall shows now. It's a good season.